So my name is Matthew Bernhout. I am the Vice President of Deliverability with NetCore Solutions for North America. I also work with Derek a lot. We did the Canadian Email Summit for the last 2 years together. We are planning additional events that way as well. John, we couldn't get you in on the summit this year, but we were able to work this session out, and as a special bonus for everybody involved. Um, so yeah, my background, I've just been in deliverability and marketing consulting for 20 years, and really am interested in how AMP for email works, and getting more brands to utilize it. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation today with John. So John, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Matthew. Glad you're excited. We are too. Let me start the magical sharing. All right. Tell me if you can't see the thing I think you can see, which is the future of email.
I can see it.
Cool. So as Matthew said, my name is John Harmer. I'm a product manager for AMP for Email on the Gmail team at Google. And I'm really excited to talk about the future of email, specifically AMP for Email, what it is, what you can do with it, and how you can get started. First, I'm going to set a little context by talking a little bit about email. All of us on this call today obviously use email for tons of different reasons every day. We make plans with friends, we check out promotions or send promotions from places we like to shop. We probably get the latest updates from social networks we use. We may get too many of those. Sometimes we provide feedback on products or services, and there's tons more reasons you use email. It's a part of the fabric of our lives, and it's key to all of our jobs here on this call. In fact, email is so popular that 2.6 billion users use Gmail every month, and last year over 293 billion emails were sent every single day. I feel like most of those ended up in my inbox. But anyway, it's hard to overstate how critical email is to people. It keeps us connected to a bunch of the things that are important in our lives. And it's been around for a whole long time, a few decades at least. And over that time, the web has evolved very significantly. We've gone from static articles and content to these dynamic interactive applications that support really complex interactions. For example, in the early 2000s, nobody thought you'd be able to run a full spreadsheet application or a presentation application in your browser, or even a real-time video conference. But that's what we do today with Google Sheets, what I'm doing with this presentation in Google Slides, right? Over that same time period, though, email has stayed pretty much the same. There's been some innovations in how we manage and process email, but what you can actually send in the content of a message hasn't changed that much. You can essentially include text, images, and links. Not much more. And the content is still technically static, so it can get out of date, and users are often looking at stale information. Additionally, emails aren't clickable and interactive in the same way that users have come to expect from the rest of the modern web. So it's pretty strange, right? Email plays a central role in the lives of billions of people, and it has been around for decades. And during that time, the web has evolved significantly, but the email has been left behind. The messages that you send can still just contain text, links, and images. It hasn't kept up with the kind of changes we've seen elsewhere on the internet. Some companies have made some valiant attempts to introduce interactivity into HTML emails in various ways, but it hasn't really become a standard just yet, which is why we created AMP for Email. AMP for Email allows senders to include the richness and interactivity of the AMP standard inside of their email messages, truly bringing email into the 21st century. So this is a pretty big deal. AMP for Email supports a bunch of new use cases in email. First, it can make your emails more interactive with clickable interfaces right inside the message so that users can browse and explore content without ever leaving their email client. Second, AMP emails can be kept up to date so that users don't see stale information when they open them. Third, users can actually take action from right inside the email. Things like managing subscription preferences, responding to a questionnaire or an invitation, maybe even the first few steps of a workflow without ever opening a new tab. And we'll get into that more later. Also, AMP for Email is compatible with your existing emails. It adds to the overall email standard rather than replacing it. So it's just a third MIME type to include in the email body alongside the current text and HTML parts. So with all that together, AMP for Email unlocks a bunch of never before possible use cases in email that we never would have imagined a few years ago. So some of the things that you can do in AMP are basically visual components to make the emails more interesting, such as the AMP components for carousel, accordion, and sidebars. Others add additional functionalities such as time ago, and the really interesting pieces are around AMP bind, AMP list, and AMP form, which can make the magic truly happen in an email. So let me dig into some examples real quick. This is a very simple example. It's a survey we sent out asking for feedback on the Google I/O conference last year, back when we used to do conferences, the good old days, the olden times. Rather than have users click on an email, open an email, click on the link, and then open up a new tab, fill out the feedback, et cetera, we wanted them to be able to take action right from inside the message. So by lowering this friction to responding, we got a higher response rate from the audience and gave us a much better idea of how they like the conference. So let's look at what's new in here. First off, you'll see that there's interactive radio buttons that you can click on inside the message. Once you click on one of those, it gives you a new text box so that you can add more details. And finally, obviously, there's the send feedback button, which literally submits it via HTTP request directly to the server without opening a new tab or anything. You get everything done right inside that message. And as you can see, this sort of semi-snippet of the code from the radio buttons on down. Oops, sorry. That was crazy. Let's go back. On through the end of the form shows that it's relatively straightforward to create these kinds of things. Here's another example. You see the HTML version on the top. You always have to have an HTML fallback. You have to have all three parts in an AMP message. And then the AMP version, which will display for people whose clients support AMP. You see that it sort of accordions down, and then it gives you the new feedback field. You hit submit. You never have to leave the client. So out in the wild, there have been a number of different implementations of this that I think are worthwhile to share, if for no other reason than just to get people's creative juices flowing. So on that sort of core marketing-y, make it prettier use case version, there's this accordion here on the right, and then the HTML fallback on the left that the Nest team sent out for back to school last year. And then they send a similar version using a carousel instead. So you can see, a series of images on the left in the HTML fallback. And then, of course, the AMP part is the carousel. And they saw a pretty significant lift in interactions as a result of sending those. No numbers we can share externally, but it was definitely a positive experiment. Pinterest, which is a social network for ideas, they send users email notifications about ideas they might be interested in. Before AMP, the messages were static and unactionable. When a user saw something they like, they'd have to open up Pinterest to save it to their boards. And now with AMP for email, Pinterest users can just click, like they do everywhere else on the web, to save new ideas they're interested in. LendingTree experimented with an in-email loan recommendation survey, which is powered by AMP, and their results on that were quite positive as well. No hard numbers I can share, but I'll get to some of those in a bit. Dispatch created an event survey relatively recently, so hopefully in future webinars or on amp.dev in our case study case, we'll have some actual numbers from this because this one is relatively recent. They also did one that was a product review where you can go through, stars, add a title and the actual content of the review inside that message. This one's going to take a second to get through its whole animation, but you generally get the idea, right? You hit submit, you never leave email, you just get the thing done and move on. Indeed did something a little bit simpler. They're a job search website I assume everybody's familiar with, helps people find jobs. Previously, they would send emails to newly recommended, newly posted jobs to users. Problems with those alerts is that sometimes when you open that email, that job could no longer be available, or there could be something even better for Indeed to recommend to you. So what Indeed did was they AMP powered that top promote sponsored job post to make sure that they're fetching the latest recommended jobs and make sure they're still available and more personalized. And when they implemented that, they saw 2 times as many clicks on those job alert emails. Ecwid is a e-commerce platform like you would think of like Shopify or BigCommerce. They allow their users to quickly set up e-commerce sites. So with AMP for email, their customers can send emails to their customers with things like this interactive catalog where users can click through products and view details in larger images. Or when they sign up to get an Ecwid account in the first place, since they're creating a shop, they want to confirm these email addresses are something that is useful. And you'll see right there that they take that email confirmation and then turn it in. Once you've confirmed that your email is valid, it turns it into a take me to my dashboard button. So the next time you come to this message, you'll just see that sign into the control panel right away. They also have always updated order status, so you can see where along their customers can see where along the purchase process anything they've gotten is. And finally, they created an AMP version of the abandoned cart email that allows you to browse through the things you left in your cart and get back to the purchase process, which actually increased on average across all of their merchants that use abandoned cart emails, increased sales. So top line revenue by 27%. And actually one of their merchants had an 82% increase in sales, which is just mind blowing. Oyo is a travel recommendation site based out of India. They send users emails with travel recommendations for places, they might want to book accommodations. Again, this is pre-locking yourself down in whatever country you live in. But with their AMP emails, they allowed their users to browse options, see larger photos about each accommodation, and details like free Wi-Fi or breakfast, all inside that message. When they implemented that, they saw a 57% increase in the click-through rate and a 60% increase in conversions, which is obviously awesome. Find Domestic is an Italian consumer credit company. They created another dynamic loan calculator. What happens here is you choose a project type by clicking on those icons there at the top. They edit the amount that you want to receive. And then the algorithm produces an amount due and an interest rate all inside the email without being redirected to any landing page, or making any server calls. So it feels like a zero latency calculator. This experience that they implemented resulted in over 130% improvement to click-through rates, all because of AMP. And Skipify, let me see if I can get this to work. So it's not just a black square. Victory is ours. All right. Skipify has enabled the entire shopping process inside of emails. So here you can see an example with one of their clients, Play Shoes. And as you can see, the user can sort of scroll through and choose different styles or colorways, as they call it in the sneaker biz. Then they can choose a size there. A quantity, in this case, they're just getting one, and they add it right to the cart. This cart is actually built into the email. You'll see cart checkout one item there at the bottom. And here they're going to add some additional products to the cart. So they're going to scroll through the different colors of straps. One moment while they do their scrolling. They're going to pick the pink ones, pick a size, pick a quantity of 2, add it to the cart. And then you see at the bottom, there's that checkout with 3 items. That makes a call back to the server and then re-renders the cart inside of the email. You can keep shopping, or you can click buy with one touch. And if you have an account through a Skipify merchant, it literally allows you to complete that purchase inside of that email, which is pretty amazing. In their earliest trials, they saw a 37% increase in revenue from emails, a 52% decrease in unsubscribes, which I definitely need to check into with that team and understand what the hypothesis is there. And I'll get into this part later, zero coding from your email team, because Skipify will actually build out those experiences for you. So for marketers, it seems like kind of a no-brainer, right? Increased click-through rates, increased conversions, increased revenue. Who doesn't want that? But AMP isn't just for, sorry, I went too far. Isn't just for marketing use cases, marketing campaigns. You can also enable users to be more productive in doing little tasks every day. So anybody who's a Google Workspace, now rebranded customer, has probably experienced this. This is Google Docs comments. Whenever you tag somebody in a comment on a document, it sends an email to that person. Previously, these emails would go out of date relatively quickly as people collaborated on that document and new replies came in. And you'd also have to open up a new tab to see this latest status or to do anything with that comment, reply, or respond. And now with these AMP emails, you can, as you see in the animation there, you can reply right inside your email. You can resolve the thing. You also see the most up-to-date comments when you enter, and you see your comment reflected in the thread. Another one we just implemented was Drive access. So when somebody requests access to a file stored on Google Drive, you receive an email with that access request. Previously, you'd have to open up a new tab and it'd have a modal and it'll allow you to give that access to the user. But now you can manage that request directly from inside the message, choosing the access level and granting them access directly from inside the message. But it's not just Google that's doing these productivity things. Voxy is a professional services automation company that created a number of very useful AMP-powered emails. This is an example. Most of them are around things like approving and collaborating on different deliverables for a professional services firm, such as a quote or timesheets or invoices like this one here. So you can see that a user can comment and or approve, reject this invoice. When they implemented this, they decreased approval times from basically a day, a little more than a day, to right around 4 hours. And it's not just Voxy and Google. Guru is a collaborative knowledge management solution that allows their customers to create and share knowledge whenever they need to. They launched an AMP for email experience that allows users to expand and read what they call their knowledge cards within an email thread. They can then complete actions such as card verifications and replying to comments, making these emails much more useful and relevant to their users. And as you can see, the left side is the before and the right HTML version. The right side is the AMP version. It's a lot more interesting and seamless experience. Clicks are getting longer. So while this implementation is relatively new, the early results have been pretty exciting, right? 2.5 times increase in the number of card comment actions and 75% increase in the verification actions, which are the key metrics for this company. They want to make sure that that knowledge is always up to date and valid. And they're going to extend, based on these results, their AMP to a bunch of different kinds of notification emails on their platform. Final example is Copper. They're a CRM and project management solution designed specifically for Google customers. Instead of receiving static email notifications each time somebody's tagged, like in Google Docs, they leverage AMP to give users a single dynamic email where they can see all the relevant information about this opportunity sales deal thing. They can respond to comments from their teammates. They can also add reactions, because who doesn't like emojis? And their guiding principle is simple. They really want to have everything you need right in the inbox so that they can collaborate. You can collaborate nimbly and be more productive. When they launched that, their users are now sending on average 10,000 AMP emails per week. And they've seen a massive uptake in their comments, in these like reactions and comments. And so they're also quite happy. So some more of these like productivity use cases you can think of: commenting on content I showed you, mentioning tagging people, granting access to files, approvals, reviews on whatever expenses, vacation requests, content, ticketing systems, things like that. Simple actions, so anything like moving something one step along in a workflow, like maybe if you have some automated service that fails, you can restart it. Or you can stop following items, things like notifications or like subscription preferences, whatever. And then obviously satisfaction surveys are a huge one. And I do see that a couple of questions have come in while I've been chatting. We will definitely get to those once I get through the slides, just so everybody knows. So really briefly, it's important to make sure that the dynamic, that you follow some basic design guidelines. This is just sort of good hygiene, largely. So make sure that its dynamic aspects serve a clear purpose, that they provide value. You're not just doing this to be flashy. Make sure that the interactive elements are clear and that users can easily discover them. It's relatively new, so maybe people won't know, so make it as clear as possible. People are also, since this is starting to feel more like the regular web, they're going to expect navigation structures similar to that. So if you go into like a catalog item, make sure that there's a back button or an undo button or whatever it is to get you back to the state you're in before. And if you allow people to take action, like the Google Docs comments, make sure that you give them a status, like they don't have their click go into the ether. Like the Docs comments emails, when you apply that comment, it shows in that thread, right? And then make sure that the dynamic elements make sense. You don't want to rebuild an entire app inside of the email, although the team at Dispatch is going with apps in email as their tagline. So it might be kind of cool to see what you can do, but be thoughtful about the kinds of use cases that make sense versus the ones that really make sense to take you to the full website experience or your app. And obviously with any user-facing service, make sure to test your AMP email to ensure that it's accessible for users of screen readers and other accessibility features on desktop and mobile. So that's a lot about what it is, how it works, kind of. We knew that when we created this, in order for it to actually modernize email, it has to engage. We had to engage the entire email ecosystem to make sure that AMP emails can be delivered and tested using the tools people use today. And there's tons of pieces to that puzzle, obviously. You use ESPs, use testing services, and obviously you have to deliver to email clients. So let's dig into where that support exists today. On the delivery side, we've partnered with tons of the most popular players, from Adobe to Salesforce to SendGrid, and there are many, many more on the way. This is a subset, and we don't even have, like, the full list is at amp.dev for any of these senders, ESPs who have asked to be on that list. Every once in a while, we have to remind people when we find out that they support it, that they should be on that list. And that pull request is how you get added to that list if you are a sender. And then on creation and design, there's a bunch of companies that are trying to make that easier for everyone. Stripo has a drag and drop email builder, and Skipify, who I mentioned earlier, also will take your HTML email and automatically create an AMP version for you. Litmus and NodeMailer are popular testing platforms that support testing of AMP emails. And as I mentioned, we have to work on multiple email clients. So AMP for email is today supported in Gmail, mail.ru, and Yahoo Mail, and soon AOL.com. So with AMP for email, you can bring a ton of engaging experiences into email, shift your emails from being these static, flat messages to dynamic, interactive mini applications. Your emails can fetch up-to-date information and allow users to take action right from inside the message. It's compatible with a lot of the tools you already use for delivery and testing, and most importantly, it works with a bunch of the popular email clients. So the obvious next question is, what do I do now? First, you want to find out if your ESP supports AMP for email. Look on that list and or just ask them. Many do, obviously, but there are plenty of others that are just waiting for demand from their customers to prioritize this work. Letting them know that you are interested helps tremendously. And then you want to start creating and testing AMP emails using the AMP Playground so that you can make sure that you can start the process properly, which means you have to meet all of our guidelines. You send an AMP-enabled production-ready email to the email clients you want to deliver AMP to, and you fill out the registration form, which is a single form for all the appropriate clients. So if you want to learn more, obviously ask questions in this webinar, or go to go.amp.dev/learn-email. There's a guide for registration there, which I can grab the link to and drop in chat if that would be useful. And then each one of the email clients has their own pages with more detail about their implementation. And that, in 20 minutes, is AMP for email.
Thanks very much, John. That was a great overview. Lots of examples actually that I haven't seen before. There was a number of examples that I felt were just sort of repeating over and over again for the last year, but some of those new ones were great. Great to see. I'd never seen them before. I'm also going to probably have to contact you to update our logo on the AMP service provider list.
Please do.
Have our old logo on there, but either way, I'm going to confirm that our platform it already supports it, but that it gets the right logo. So
yeah,
we have a number of great questions. I have a couple that I just want to sort of throw out there first. I think that kind of will answer maybe a few of these as well. But right now, with AMP for email, is this a Gmail only, or is this a G Suite and Gmail application? So both platforms?
And yeah, so it's Gmail, regardless of whether you are a G Suite customer or a consumer Gmail user. Any one of the 2.6 billion monthly active Gmail users can see these. Also Yahoo, AOL.com soon, also mail.ru. So it's actually is very important to us that this wasn't just a Google thing, because if it's just the way that interactivity works on Gmail, that's not enough, right? So that's why it's AMP for email is part of the OpenJS Foundation, and is, we have a monthly working group with the other email clients as well. Salesforce is also in that working group, as we try to make this more of a standard and more of an adopted thing.
Sure. Yeah, you guys are doing a lot of work in that area too, even like with annotations, which is different but similar. And then Bimmy, you're in the Bimmy pilots right now and trialing that out. That's a group that I'm working closely with the Gmail team as well. Different group, but yeah. There's a question here, and this is an interesting one. I was going to ask this, but then I kind of didn't know if it was, something you'd want to talk about. Recently, Outlook decided to move away from AMP as of end of October. So the question here is, any plans to bring this back to Office or Outlook, as opposed to their announcement? Any insight into sort of that decision or thoughts on how we can maybe entice Microsoft to support this again?
Yeah, great. That's a fantastic question. So, for a little less than a year, I guess, they had what they called a developer preview in Outlook.com, so the artist formerly known as Hotmail. They never had implemented it in sort of Office 365 webmail, anything like that, right? And they did announce that they were removing support for it. But in our conversations with them, they are certainly open to adding support to it again in the future. I think it just is going to take, they need a little more momentum than what they had seen in their early days. So it's, more ESPs supporting it, more senders sending it, more volume going through with AMP parts. I expect, and obviously, I cannot speak for the team at Microsoft. I expect that they would pick this back up again. The code's there. They just need to turn it back on again and get some results. And I really hope that with the some more of the productivity use cases, that would entice them to bring it onto the Office 365 world as well. Right.
Sure. So is that something you would recommend people as they continue to reach out to Microsoft, poke them and say, I'd really love to send AMP email to my users there?
I will always recommend that if you want to send AMP emails and there's somebody in the ecosystem that is blocking you from doing it, that you should reach out and tell them.
Okay. This is maybe a bit more of like a spam filter question as opposed to a use case question for the Gmail interface. But understanding that decisions on delivery to the inbox are predominantly looked at based on engagement and metrics around spam complaints and users opening and clicking mail. Do you expect that engagement within an AMP email, because you're not really leaving the inbox at that point, is going to help maintain or build that type of engagement metrics that solution providers such as Gmail are looking for in messages? Is that something that will help build those positive engagement metrics or build those positive indicators for engagement?
Yeah, I would expect that it would. So I don't have specific insight into the black box voodoo that is the magic,
Sure.
inside of Gmail for that. But these emails are treated in very similar ways to the HTML emails in terms of if you are interacting with them, if you are, getting value out of them, people aren't marking them as spam, all those kinds of things, right? Then they will be, that helps, I guess is the best way to say that, right? But having an AMP part doesn't necessarily itself improve the situation necessarily, right? You still have to have content that people want to interact with. You still have to, just adding AMP isn't enough.
Right.
AMP will increase your interaction rates most likely, but and that will then benefit you, if that makes sense. Yeah,
no, it makes sense to me. Hopefully, if that didn't answer your question, though, please rephrase it and ask again, and I'll do my best to get back to that. So there's another question here, and this is, as a service provider myself, people are looking for, how do you get an ESP to implement AMP, right? Are there any things that you would recommend other than just going back to them and asking, much like the Microsoft question, just continue to bug your ESP to support it?
Yeah, if you, I'm not sure if Mauro is speaking from the point of view of I am an ESP, what do I need to do? Or I need to tell my ESP what they need to do.
Ask. Sorry, the question is, as an ESP, what do we need to
do? Reach out. We're happy to help you get started if you're an ESP to figure out how to implement it. Many of the ESPs started with basically, I will drop a blank text box that you can put AMP code into, and then I will not strip it out of the message when you hit send, as the MVP version. Other people like Streepo and others, I guess they're not really an ESP, but other people have gone further with let me give you a builder inside of here to make it easier for you to create these messages. It is entirely up to you. At a minimum, if you start by not stripping the AMP part out and, allowing people to drop a part in, that's helpful. And I mean, Matthew, I don't know if you had any insight into how hard, easy any of that was for y'all.
I personally don't. It's not a part of the system that I work within on the development side. I do know that we have a WYSIWYG editor that we utilize. Actually, the Oyo example that you shared, that's one of our brands that we work with in the past, and to send email on their behalf. So that was implemented through our platform in order to send those messages. So it was great to see that example. I think I've seen it once or twice in the past as well. It's one of those.
It's been there from the beginning, or from early on our launch. Yeah, I keep that around because I like the metrics though.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's good. This is another question, another one that really sort of resonates with me. The other hat that I wear beyond deliverability is sort of that privacy security aspect of email and such. And I've heard this argument several times in the past about security and AMP and how it has sort of weaknesses or potential flaws. How would you address that when someone says, what should we think about from a security point of view when developing or looking at AMP?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things as you might expect, the Google security, privacy, spam, phishing teams are uber vigilant overall. And I would argue they are quite good at what they do. And everything we do with AMP had to, go through those approvals. So we have done a number of things to make sure that this is still secure and private. The AMP parts are rendered in a sandbox iframe. If you forward an email message that has an AMP part to it, that AMP part is stripped out so that you can't accidentally, release any credentials to somebody else by accident. The question comes up enough that we are going to work on some, a white paper / FAQ / some kind of content to share around this. Another thing that sort of helps is after 30 days, AMP emails will fall back to HTML, which is very useful for senders so they don't have to keep up these endpoints forever for old campaigns, right? It allows you to be done with a thing after a month. And then in terms of, especially on those productivity use cases, like, Copper and Guru and Voxy, like they have to authenticate that you are the right user, that you have access to do the thing you need to do. And it's basically done with the tokenization concept, similar to like a password reset thing. And it's up to you if you want to have that, that token expire after 24 hours, 30 days, whatever the thing is to help you with that. That's another thing that enables that authentication to work a little better.
Right. Okay, great. And how do you see AMP working with, or alongside things like annotations that have been sort of a newer feature within the Gmail platform in the last, call it 18, 24 months? The BIMI pilot in regards to being able to implement and change your brand logos and the user interface and such. How do these things all work together, and sort of where would you think priority comes in when it comes to annotations? You can set the brand logo over top of some of these other things. When it comes to AMP, how do these all play together?
Yeah, the annotations and the BIMI stuff is much more in that what we call the threadless view when you're looking at all your emails. Mm-hmm. At that point, you literally don't know if you open an email if it will render as AMP or not, interestingly enough. And so the AMP part happens on open and at render time. And there's actually a number of reasons why AMP emails may fall back to HTML outside of just like an unsupported client. Currently, if one of your users is on iOS using dark mode, it will fall back. If there's a server connectivity problem and you have some XHRs that can't connect, like it'll fall back. If there's any errors in the code, in the AMP code, it'll fall back. So there's a bunch of fallback reasons. And in fact, when you're making your emails and testing them, you can enable, and the Gmail documentation at developers.google.com has pointers on this. You can enable what we call the developer fallback widget, so that when you send yourself those test messages, if they do fall back, you'll get a little banner across the top that says why this message fell back while you're doing that testing process. It is extremely helpful so that you're not just like, guessing.
Right.
So
okay.
that, yeah.
Right. And then I know with AMP, there is sort of that registration process in order to participate. You know, at what point do you think a brand is ready to take that first step to, you know, I'm interested in AMP. I go out and I learn a bit about it. Now I'm ready to register and start trialing. Like, where do you see brands at that point? And, you know, are we seeing a lot of adoption or sort of those people taking that first step?
Yeah, we are. I think as soon as you have a good idea for an AMP enabled experience, an interactive experience, you want to do an email, and you can get it sort of mocked up and tested and are ready with something that's like production ready. I think that's a great time to register because it is a requirement that you have a production ready email as part of the registration process. Um, and from there, it's just, you know, how you want to segment, how you want to test, things like that. But earlier is better, in my opinion.
And is the registration processes still different for, say, Mail.ru and Yahoo and then Gmail? Are they still
There,
separate?
yeah, there are minor differences in some of the requirements.
Mhm.
I think Mail.ru has a volume requirement. Gmail used to, we do not anymore. Um, but there's a single registration form. So you fill out, you know, off of amp.dev, there's a form you go to, fill that out once, and then you send test emails to each of the clients you want to get registered with.
Okay, great. So
So,
yeah,
so
I
we're
knew that was
trying to
getting,
simplify it. Yeah.
yeah, I heard that was getting streamlined as opposed to having to register in 3 different locations. So that's good to hear that one
Baby
location
steps.
gets the process started. So um I guess what's next for AMP, right? So you mentioned there's a few use cases that you had in your list. There's about 8 of them, I think, that you listed out. You know, are we going to see some additional evolutions of things that AMP can do over the next year to make it that much more integrated? Or the things that you can, you know, spill the tea on what's next?
I mean, you can, as you saw in some of those examples, you could do some pretty robust stuff up to and including with Skipify, like all the way shopping cart and checkout, right? Um, so I don't think there's necessarily a ton of additional AMP components that we're going to enable necessarily.
Okay.
You know, we've had requests for certain things that are just architecturally difficult, like AMP video or even custom fonts and things like that. Custom fonts are difficult for security reasons. AMP video is difficult for infrastructure reasons because we proxy back to the security question. We
Mhm.
proxy all the requests. We have to proxy all that content. So it would be a big effort to proxy all videos going through all emails, right? That'd be a big deal. So we don't have plans to add any components like that. We do want to work on that dark mode support thing so that you can choose how your emails render in dark mode and keep the AMP functionality. Um, yeah, I mean, that's one of the bigger ones. We enabled a bunch of different CSS recently that I talked about at AMP Fest, and some other, you know, sort of minor tweaks around the edges like that.
Okay, great. Are you seeing as any specific industry adopting AMP more so than others? Like, is it, I know you gave sort of a very broad example from insurance to travel to shopping, you know, e-commerce, but are there particular industries that are jumping forward with AMP more so than others?
I mean, I think it probably maps to, are there certain industries that like email marketing? It feels pretty well aligned with that. I'm still, as you noticed, I put some extra emphasis on those productivity use cases. I'm trying to get more of that to happen. I want people to be more productive in their inbox.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm, you know, we on Gmail at Google are trying to get more of those kinds of senders going. And hopefully we'll have some exciting announcements, or you'll see some exciting things in that realm in the next, I don't know, year. But yeah, I think anybody who sends email, there's probably a use case that makes sense to do with AMP. Even if it's just like managing subscription preferences widget at the bottom, or, you know, how useful was this email's customer satisfaction smileys. Like, there's something you can do um, to make your users' lives better with this.
Okay. What, you know, beyond sort of the productivity use cases, are you, you know, is there an industry that you think maybe is underutilizing or like is completely ignored AMP for email that, you know, maybe as a collective, as like an, you know, service provider collective, we should be reaching out to that specific industry to say, why aren't you doing this?
I don't know. I actually haven't gone through the registrations that we've had and cut them through by verticals.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
see some of the the use cases you had around sort of travel for hotels, but I think airlines would be great too. You get up to the minute price notifications.
How about like a seat selector? That'd be kind of neat, right?
Yeah, those things right in your email would be select the seat, whether it's you could pay in the email or at least get you to that process of, I know who you are, I know how many seats, and I know where you want to sit, take you to the
Right.
shop,
I mean,
right?
presumably they already have your credit card information and have a relationship with you, and you have a login to have bought the tickets. So it shouldn't be too difficult to add something like select a seat and potentially pay for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a use case that I think I would love to see. I think that's the one thing. Like, I subscribe to hundreds of newsletters just as a result of my time in the industry, and I actually don't really see a lot of AMP messages outside of some of the productivity cases. Especially the Google Docs um, items. So I'm just trying to think. How do we as an industry push people to start adopting or start considering even testing, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think when people see examples, so if you're an ESP, you could create, you know, fake versions of things to use as sort of to pitch your clients on, and or if you made a templated version, so like here's the satisfaction survey template, uh, click this, fill in your details, and automatically brand it or whatever, and then do that. Like I think that helps. Like anything to remove the friction and make it obvious for your users what to do with AMP probably would help a ton, really.
Okay. And then, so we got another question here. It came from the audience around cost, right? So right now, HTML emails, you build those. You don't really need to build any backend infrastructure for it other than the email platform. Are there any additional above and beyond costs that marketers need to think about when it comes to developing AMP for email in regards to maybe more hosting, or is it just more time maybe to develop and learn the platform?
Yeah, it's probably closer on the more time to develop and learn the platform, but also somewhat dependent upon your use case. Like if you need to stand up a new database of something, um, for the satisfaction survey results or something like this. But presumably most people have some kind of uh, infrastructure that they use for storing satisfaction surveys or subscription preferences or whatever the thing is, especially the productivity use case. You're making callbacks to your, the Google Docs servers, right? So we have that infrastructure in place already. I think in the case of, I think it, one of the vendors, it might have been Strupo, they have like a form backend that you can use if you don't have one already. And I think as ESPs, that's another thing you can do to facilitate this process, right? If set up, mini infrastructure for any vendors that don't have the thing that they need.
Right. So there's no actual cost to AMP other than maybe some internal infrastructure stuff that you may need to build on your own. So, okay.
There's certainly no cost to, Google, Mail.ru, and Yahoo aren't charging anybody anything.
Right.
Potentially an ESP could have that as an upsell option, but I don't know that anyone is doing that at this point. So,
Right. Yeah, I haven't heard that either.
yeah.
So another question that's just come in, you know, the dev site that you have set up, right? How, is that something people have to register for? Can they just go play with it?
I
Do you
think you
need to
have to have a
create?
I think you have to have a Gmail account for the Gmail playground. So there's two playgrounds. There's Gmail playground on developers.google.com, and there's an AMP playground on amp.dev. You might have to have a Gmail account for those. You definitely have to have one for the Gmail playground, and I don't know on the amp.dev one.
Okay. Okay.
It seems
And
like you would. It'd be better if you didn't have to, because maybe you just want to send a Yahoo, but I don't know.
right. Right. Okay. Um, and then, I'm assuming, I'm not a developer, so I'm probably not the right person to know this answer. But when it comes to resources around developing AMP and getting the use cases right, I'm assuming you just send people to the AMP website. They'll have code samples and limitations and
Correct. Yeah, and in the playground, there's a bunch of templated things too. So, um, you don't have to start from scratch. You can choose a template, a form, whatever, and start from that and sort of tweak your case.
Okay. And then any gotchas that you've seen where someone's like, why doesn't this work? Or, are expecting it to work in both, Mail.ru, Yahoo, and Gmail, that, there's maybe some differences that people should be aware of?
Other than I think the Mail.ru team has a volume, like a monthly or something volume requirement. It's documented on their page. So that if you are a low volume sender, it might work in Gmail and Yahoo, but then not work on Mail.ru potentially. Other than that, I don't think so. We try as a working group to keep the implementation of the standards in line with each other, but obviously we all have different roadmaps, we all have different release schedules, so sometimes it may be a little bit off. Like I think we just launched or are about to launch one of the two AMP autocomplete as a new widget, and I don't know that the others have done that rollout yet, for example. But in the case where if you implement AMP autocomplete and they open it on a Yahoo thing, it just fails back gracefully to a regular field. It just doesn't allow you to do the auto completion, right? So
fair enough. Any final thoughts for the audience around AMP and getting them to sort of start adopting it or think about it, and then where can they go? Like, what's the best place for them to go for help?
Yeah, definitely may go back here. Definitely the amp.dev site is the #1 place to go, as well as these specific sites for the different email clients. Actually, brief callback to the security question. One of the other things that I think is not well known that I just take for granted is AMP doesn't allow you to just do arbitrary JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, right? You can do a bunch of CSS and HTML stuff, but the only sort of scripting components that you can bring into these messages are the AMP components themselves. And each of the clients has a validator, and all the ESPs generally have a validator that if it doesn't validate, it will not render, right? So if you try to somebody tries to sneak something evil in, it won't happen. So brief callback there, and that ends up getting documented on the amp.dev site. And yeah, there's a AMP Slack channel where a bunch of people talk about these things. I think it's something as simple as amp.slack. I can't tell. Yeah, well,
we'll get
there's definitely robust conversations there about regular AMP component, like website stuff, story stuff, but also AMP for email. And then there's I participate occasionally in the Email Geeks Slack channel, and there's conversations about AMP there as well. Definitely a great place to go when you have questions. There's tons of Email Geeks there with tons of experience.
I was going to mention that as well. That's a great resource for all things email, but definitely I see AMP questions come up there all the time. So
yeah, really, really active community there.
Yeah, it's great. If you're not a participant, email.geeks.chat, I think, is where you go to put your application in to join. Yeah, so email.geeks.chat. Derek, are there anything else you'd like to close with? John, I just want to thank you for your time. It was great. I learned quite a bit, and I'm glad to see some new examples coming out of AMP as well.
Cool.
Thank Derek, you, Matt, and John. That was very informative and appreciated. For anybody who wants to share this with anybody else on your team, it will be posted on the event page on the Response Marketing Association site. We will email a link once it's posted to everybody who is on the call. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you all very much. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciated it. And go have fun with AMP.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks very much.